are now live. Okay. Live on the speakers now as well.
Testing, 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 testing. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Sounds quite nice as well. You should be able to come through on the speakers as well. Okay, so
Maybe we stand here.
stand up on stage. Just give you a
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2.
Yeah.
2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah. Grand. swap them. When you're finished chatting as well, just so that we can swap the mics over, just keep in mind stepping off stage down this way, then we can swap because they're out of frame as soon as you hit it out there. Okay? Thanks, lads.
If you come off stage,
Go behind.
let them know because they'll drop the mic.
Let's think. Yeah.
Testing. You shut that one.
Héndó trí car chuig sé seachtach ní de, a héndó trí car chuig sé seachtach ní de. All good? Hello folks. Dia réber fad tá míle fáilte roh an seo hegin áit fíor starúil, simúil, and you're all very welcome to this. You're all very welcome to Bow Street, Jameson's Distillery Bow Street for the President's, the IWS President's fundraising tasting. It's wonderful to see you all here. I'm delighted that we have been invited here and I know that you're going to enjoy the wonderful, wonderful liquid that's going to be presented this evening. We've two experts that are going to join me on stage. Well, they're going to join the stage. I'm going to just sit down here and enjoy it with you guys. But first, I'm going to introduce you to them. So please welcome on the stage. We've got Andrew Dickey. Andrew? And Eric Ryan. So they're going to talk you through the wonderful liquids tonight. I'm going to stop talking now, but just to let you know, we'll have a short break, a 15-minute break after the first 3 samples. The bar will be open, but we'll be starting again after 15 minutes and do the second 3. Then we'll do the raffle, and the bar will then be open again afterwards. And we have it'll close, I think it's 10:15, and we have to be out. Everybody has to be out by 11 o'clock. So just to let you know that that's a hard deadline. And but enjoy the evening, and please, once again, give a round of applause to our wonderful presenters.
Good evening, everyone. I suppose just another big round of applause for Brían for all his hard work and dedication to make this event happen this evening. Very warm welcome to Jameson Distillery Bow Street, the original home of Jameson. And I suppose a very big warm welcome to everyone in the Irish Whiskey Society. My name is Andrew Dickey. I'm the Brand Engagement and Advocacy Team Manager, which is a very corporate term for a retired bartender. So very warm welcome this evening to Bow Street. I've been with Irish Distillers just over 6.5 years, originally beginning my career looking after our white spirits portfolio before jumping into the Irish whiskey portfolio as of September last year. And I'm delighted to actually make this come to fruition, and I hope you all enjoy the tasting that we're going to go through this evening. I have to be that person, health and safety guru. So just in the case of a fire exit or emergency, please use the fire exits, which is where you've entered the building and just behind Damien here. Those tuning in online, you don't have to worry about that. Hopefully you have a nice drink in front of you before we get stuck into the tasting. Also, toilets are just as you entered the building at the Bow Street entrance. As Brían says, we will be tasting 3 whiskies. We might give you 2 to 3 minutes to discuss in your tables after each whisky. Then we'll jump back into it. After 3, we'll break for 15 minutes where the bar is going to be open. And then after that, we'll go into the final 3, which will be followed by the raffle, closing speeches, and then the bar will be open before you're politely asked to leave, because unfortunately we are in a residential area and we are strict on curfew. Without further ado, I'm delighted this evening to be joined by Eric Ryan, who is a distiller and also innovation and maturation specialist based down in the Midleton Distillery in County Cork. Obviously, I'm from Belfast, so I won't try and do a Cork accent. But anyway, I'll pass over to Eric to introduce himself, and we'll get started into the first whisky. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the evening.
I'm delighted to be here this evening. I know many of the faces here from my previous times visiting Dublin on whisky trips. I suppose I'll introduce myself a little bit more just to give a background on me. I started working in Midleton Distillery in 2010. I actually started as a distillery operator. The first 12 years was all brewing and distilling, nothing else. And I had various positions while doing brewing and distilling. And now I'm specialising, as Andrew said, in maturation and innovation. You might have come across me previously as Powers Distiller, which I am, but what that actually means is that I represent the brand internally in the distillery and also externally as an ambassador, but I do work on all of the brands under the Irish Distillers portfolio. So I know a little bit about these different whiskies in front. And what we have tonight is a great lineup. Represents 6 of the 7 brands that we have in Midleton. And I'm going to start with the first one up on the top left, which is a Powers, close to my heart, of course. Relatively young, because as we go through, you've probably looked at the mat already, we're going quite old. But it's to start with the Powers Rye. But this isn't the Powers Rye that you have in the shop. This is a single cask from a virgin American oak cask, and it's 6 years old. It's just shy of 7 years old because I think in January this whiskey would turn 7 years old, so almost 7, which is, I suppose, a historical age statement for Irish whiskies. Jameson was a 7-year-old traditionally, so was Powers Gold. So the reason I put this in there is I really like this whiskey. I think it's very interesting. It's very different. It's 100% rye. So if you think about whiskey, we all know whiskey quite well. All the whiskey around the world probably 99.9% of it has barley in there. And most of it is malted barley. Whereas this has no barley whatsoever. This is malted rye and unmalted rye. So that was the mash bill way back in the day. And that rye was grown in Wexford, in the Cooney Furlong Farm, which is in Came, in Wexford, about 15 kilometres from the Edelmine Estate, which was I suppose the ancestral home of the Powers family. So a little bit of a link there to Powers. And also, if you didn't know, you probably do, but back in the 19th century, the Powers had a traditional pot still recipe. Fionn would tell you more about this than I could, but it had a sprinkling of rye. So there would have been malted barley, unmalted barley, a little bit of oats, and then just a little sprinkling of wheat and rye, probably like salt and pepper almost. And obviously the rye to bring that pepper, probably the wheat, salt brings out the other flavours of the other grain, and that's the analogy I tend to use. Why would they do it? Like a little bit of seasoning. So that kind of gave us the inspiration to, I suppose, lay down some rye distillates. We did oats, we did rye, we did wheat, but for us in the distillery, what really caught our attention for the flavour was the rye, which is why we decided to do a 100% rye. Just before I go on to nosing it, just to, I suppose, point out that rye is an American whiskey, really. I suppose for us, we've never had a rye whiskey category, so this is the first real Irish rye whiskey. In America, to be labelled as a rye, you only have to have 51% rye in the mash bill. So this is unusual as it's 100% rye. I suppose the fact that we went with that 100% is very interesting. It's a totally new flavour profile for Irish whiskey. So having said all that, the one we're looking at in front of us is a cask strength. It's quite high. Because it's relatively young, it's 59% ABV. So, I think most of you guys here would be used to the cask strength whiskey, so probably not as much of an issue, but have a little nose at the cask strength, see what you think. If you're familiar with rye, and I have to be honest, I wasn't that familiar with rye before we started, I suppose, looking at doing it. Rye can be quite spicy, quite aggressive. What I think when you nose this, even at cask strength, I don't think it's that aggressive. It's got a bit of the spice. So when I'm nosing this now, I suppose the first thing I'm getting is a little bit of kind of breadiness, like rye bread kind of thing. The sweetness, of course, maybe toffee, kind of sugary, maybe demerara sugar, that kind of way. The spice isn't whacking you over the head. It's a touch of clove, maybe. Obviously, the vanilla is in there. Like going back to the oak, it's American oak. It's Kirkis Alba. You know what you expect from that. It's a bit different, let's say, compared to a B1. What you're expecting from the new American oak, Kirkis Alba, is more kind of vanilla. I suppose a bit of sweetness. You get that toasty kind of flavour because of it. Normally they have a heavy toast. Normally they might char the cask, so you're getting that kind of toastiness. You're getting that kind of wood flavour, and then your vanilla, maybe coconut is another flavour. So some of that's probably in there as well. Anyway, let's have a taste at this cask and see what we think. So it's very spicy, but it's not making us repel or whatever. It's just spicy. The alcohol is obviously giving us extra spice. The rye is giving us spice, but some of that kind of breadiness. I don't know if you get a taste of mint. There's almost a kind of a minty note, which I find very unusual. This is something we found when we made this rye. It has a minty aspect, like garden mint or menthol, and there's an earthiness. So it's very interesting. Definitely rye bread, and that's at the cask strength. So, but I hope you kind of get from this whiskey that it's not necessarily just spice. I think rye is more than spice, and that's what we try to achieve. So when we set out to make this, just to let you know, Powers is associated with pot stills, but this is actually distilled through column stills. And I suppose there was a reason for that. I don't know if you're picking up, maybe you might pick up a bit of clove, getting a little bit of that on the taste. Maybe with the water it'll come up more. But we decided to go with column stills. We wanted to actually target that clove flavour. It's 4-vinyl guaiacol is the name of the organic compound. And actually column stills, it's easier to target certain flavours as opposed to a pot still. So in your columns, multi-story columns, you've got different trays, and I suppose the volatility of certain flavour compounds will tend to gather at different trays. So obviously we just went looking for where that particular compound was gathering, and that's where we were pulling off our spirit. It was at about 85% ABV. So it made it easier from that point of view. But another interesting thing is when we cooked it, we then sent it to the fermenters, and in the fermenters we gave it twice the fermentation time as what we give anything else. So typically for our pot still whiskey, we might do about 80 hours of fermentation time. For our grain whiskey, we do about 100 hours of a fermentation time. For the rye, we gave it 180 hours. And that will affect your flavor. So what happens is, yes, it's going to make it more efficient. We're going to, I suppose, get more extract, turn that extract into alcohol, so you get higher alcohol. But secondly, you're creating more flavors because you're creating more esters. And, you know, with this, I think we might add a drop of water. I think we'll get that more with the water added. I think it's got some fruitiness as well. So maybe if you have got a straw, that's why I ran away to get a moment ago, add in a couple of drops of water just to see how it evolves, because I think it might release some of the esters, those fruity esters that we were trying to target in fermentation. Yeah, so just to let you know, Powers rye is 43% ABV, the rye that you see in the shops, and it's the cask profile is about half virgin American oak or new American oak. Then there's I suppose refill virgins, so that means we brought them in as virgin casks, used them once, and then put in the Powers rye. We also used ex-bourbon, and we also used refill bourbon. So there's actually 4 types of American oak in the Powers rye you see in the shops. This one is specifically from a new American oak, or what we would call a virgin cask, or the code for it in the distillery is a B0. We call it a B0. So I've added in the water to this, and actually when I first put it in, I got a smack of spice, but after that it's more of that mint, actually, that garden mint I was talking about. And if you keep nosing it, and you start ignoring all of those other flavor profiles, I think it starts getting a little bit fruity. Same as Andrew after a few drinks.
Sorry for those tuning in online. The gentleman beside me thinks he's in Westlife, leaving the stage for a chord change at times. But apart from that, we've done this a few times. Don't worry, folks. We still love each other deep down.
but really, if you're nosing it, I kind of get banana, which is an interesting. Why it's interesting for me in Midleton Distillery. A lot of the whiskies for me have a banana note, especially Powers. And it's interesting that this isn't barley whatsoever, and I'm getting this banana note. So I wonder I thought it was maybe barley, but maybe banana is just some flavor profile we get in Midleton, no matter what we distill. And maybe cherry is another note that I get from this. And those kind of notes, fruity notes, come from fermentation generally. You can get them in distillation, you can get them in maturation a little bit, but generally if you get fruity notes from a whiskey, that was created in the fermenter. And by the yeast, it's basically esters. And what it is really the alcohols and the acids that kind of bounce off each other and react with each other, and they create these fruity esters. Maybe a little bit of toffee there as well. So the reason I wanted to start with this is it's only 6 years old. It's a relatively young whiskey, and it's got oodles of flavour, and something maybe for the future as a single cask. Or
We have a question actually. You've done a cask strength ours, John Lane. Are there plans for a cask strength rye?
well, there is talk of doing something, but we wanted to get a bit older, and the reason I wanted to bring this, it's starting to get older, and I think it's very, very promising. So I think maybe higher strength could be something, and age. Yes, yeah.
When you get a question from the audience, can you repeat it for those?
Okay, yeah. So what was that question again? It was. Yeah, so Powers Rye is a permanent member of the family. I suppose realistically, it was aimed at the American market rather than the Irish market, which is why probably a lot of people in Ireland haven't heard about it, even though it's in the Irish market. There wasn't a whole lot of marketing done for Powers Rye, but it's relatively inexpensive. If it was a craft distillery with 100% rye whiskey, with the cask profile that was used, it would cost twice as much as what it's selling for. I think you can pick it up for about 40 to 45 euro in the shops. Now, maybe looking at innovations as it gets older, maybe higher strength. Yeah, definitely something to look at. But it's always nice to maybe have these tastings, as we've done many times in the past, and get your opinions on it. It's kind of a little bit like market research. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll move on to the next whiskey, if that's okay.
Can you give him 2 minutes to talk about it? Give him a few minutes to talk about it, or just go straight in?
If you want, just take a minute or two, have a chat about it before we move on to the next whiskey. I
might. Is my mic on? Mic on? Yeah. I suppose one of the key things that Eric touched on there when he was talking about the rye was the process, the fermentation. When we automatically think of the likes of a lot of American ryes, from my years in the industry, I think of quite green, quite grassy, quite stringent on the palate when you think of a rye from the America or Canada. Was that the main focus when obviously you took the Irish rye from the Cooley Furlong farm in Wexford? Was it a matter of trialing different styles of fermentation to get the sweet spot, as of trying to keep it uniquely DNA Irish structure, but with something a little bit different in terms of flavour profile that you would get in the US?
I think we wanted to create a whiskey that appealed to the American market, but was also Irish at the same time. And if you want to make a spicy rye whiskey, 100% rye, yes, of course, but what you would actually do is a short fermentation. Because if you do a short fermentation, I'm talking maybe 40 to 50 hours, you're going to get a spicier taste profile. So we could have done that, but we didn't want it to be just spicy, so that's why we went the total opposite. And when you go like a long fermentation, whether you know it or not, but how it works is the yeast goes in. It's like kids in a candy shop. All the sweets and the sugar, and they go around and they're going crazy, and there's lots of heat and it's crazy, and the fermenter's bubbling, and eventually they have so much sweets they just fall down on the ground. And that's what happened. The yeast actually kills itself by eating all this sugar. As the yeast dies off, there's always a pocket of bacteria in your fermenter, no matter how clean you make it. And that bacteria then will start going, oh, all the yeast is gone. I'll step in there and start eating the remaining sugars. But the bacteria produces acids, not alcohol. And what happens then is it's those acids that react with the alcohols that are already there to create esters. And those esters are fruity and floral and fragrant. And if you want more of that, you will try to do a longer fermentation. So our idea was to, yes, get spice, but maybe have some other flavors, sweet and fruity and whatever. So yeah, that was the idea. And I think it worked reasonably well.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
Ready to go for the next?
Yeah, we'll go on to the next one. So the next one is obviously on the top to the right in the middle. And this one is it's kind of to represent the Knappogue Castle brand. Knappogue Castle, you're probably all well aware, it goes back to Mark Andrews, Knappogue Castle, gentleman and his wife that from America that came, I think it was in the 40s or 50s, and bought this castle that was run down and falling apart, and actually renovated the castle, brought it back into use. I think his wife was an architect, and that was handy. But what he also was into was Irish whiskey, and he used to buy stocks of Irish whiskey, and at the time he laid it down. I believe some was laid down in the cellars of the castle, some maybe elsewhere, and he used to bottle it for his friends and family. So if you were lucky enough to be invited to the castle, you'd probably be given a nice bottle to take away as a souvenir. And that's the way it went on for years. I think it was the 1980s when his son, maybe the 1990s, decided that maybe I should turn this into a brand and release it for sale to the general public. And I think one of those first bottles was the now famous, I suppose, Knappogue Castle, was it a 36-year-old, I think, 1951. And it was actually pot still whiskey, really, from Tullamore Dew Distillery. But over time then, as the brand developed, it became more about single malt. And now it's part of our family in that we were providing single malt for them to bottle. And it was, we got the opportunity a few years back to bring it in-house, and we now have the brand. Now, talking about single malts, you know, Midleton Distillery, we're famous for single pot still whiskey. We make grain whiskey as well. We make a little bit of malt whiskey, but we certainly don't make enough for a brand like Knappogue Castle. But going back to the days many, many years ago, we have a relationship with a distillery slightly north of our distillery. And we bring in new make malt, and we do a bit of a swap with them for some of our whiskey. So it comes from slightly north, comes to us, but the maturation...
High north is north.
Yeah. Nearly as north as you, Andrew, really. Probably far. But anyway, the casks that we choose, the maturation is all done in Midleton. So as a maturation person now and specialising in that, it's completely ours. So this one, 29 years ago, would have came into the distillery as a new make single malt distillate, and it was put into a newly arrived ex-bourbon barrel. So American oak once again, and have a little nose. I can't remember what year that is now, going back to the 29 years ago. 1995 or 4, is it? Yeah. So yeah, it's December 1994, so very close. A good year. You know, we had the World Cup in the US, 1994. We did well, you know, beat Italy, that was good. So, but anyway, having a nose of this, what I think, how it changes, I mentioned earlier about a virgin cask, kind of toasty and woody, and maybe vanilla, maybe coconut, sweet vanilla, sweet coconut, that kind of thing. But when you get it seasoned by a bourbon distillery, it dampens that down. And I think, like nosing this straight away, it brings citrus. Even after 29 years, you can get it. And maybe apple. Like when I think of American oak, that's after being seasoned with bourbon, it's kind of apples, pears, citrus, and those kind of notes are, even after 29 years in that cask, are coming through. Yes, there's vanilla as well. And maybe a touch of soft spice in the background. The thing about Kirkus Alba, American oak, is it's low in tannins. So the tannins don't have that same impact. Probably not as spicy as European oak. And then on the taste, what you find, and what I love about American oak too, especially when you're blending American oak and European oak together, American oak is a bit softer on the palate. It's a bit rounder. But then the flip side of that, because the tannins are reduced, it's not as complex. So we'll get to that later on. But anyway, let's have a taste of this at the cask strength. And this one is a bit lower because of the age, 52.6% ABV. So probably perfect as it is, but let's have a try. Sláinte.
Yeah.
Quite spicy, different kind of spice. Very malty on the taste. When nosing this, it didn't seem that malty to me. You know, when you're thinking of pot still and malt, quite often when you have a malt whiskey, you straight away smacks you across the face. I'm a malt. Whereas this one doesn't really on the nose, probably because it's triple distilled. I don't know. It's something about that other distillery. It's very Irish as a malt, if you know what I mean. You know, some of the Scotch malts, you know straight away it's a malt whiskey. But on the taste, I don't know, I get this kind of almost, I don't know, it's hard to, hedgy kind of flavour with the spice as well. Bit of that citrus.
Magic vegetable notes.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So I kind of get it more on the taste with this. It's actually drier than I would have expected, and I think that's because of the alcohol. It's still a bit high, and it's still maybe affecting the senses. The alcohol can be drying. Tannins can be drying, but alcohol can be drying. So I actually think this would be better with a couple of drops of water. So I'm going to put in a few drops. You can join me if you wish. I don't know really. So we've got lots. I mean, in Midleton now we've got about 2.4 million casks. So there's obviously going to be a lot of casks used for the various brands. We have so many brands. But there's going to be some casks that are just going to keep getting older, which is a good thing, because in the future when you need really old casks, they'll be there. But this in particular, is it going to be a Knappogue Castle? That's the brand, that's the single malt. It probably has to be at some stage, but it's not there yet. Anyway, we'll have a little nose. And I'm getting a very much red apple now. When I add it in the water. Kind of like, you know, apple strudel. It's kind of like cinnamon spice and an apple. Sweet and pastry-like, I think, you know. So it's kind of after moving a little bit from the citrus and more into the orchard. And it's all so delicate. Lots of finesse. It could be an MVR type whiskey, really. With that age, it always amazes me about casks. You go into the warehouse and it's cold, and the casks, and some of them look really old. And you take out a whiskey and it's fresh. It's after being in there for like 29 years. And when you take it out, it's fresh and vibrant. I think that's amazing. And really, that's because of the quality of the casks. The casks are looked after very well. They're kept dry. We don't leave casks out in the open. So when we bring in casks to the distillery, they come into the line. They get checked by the coopers. They go in. They get filled. They go basically sent out to the warehouse. If they're not ready to go to the warehouse, they're kept in our empty warehouse store. So they're kept indoors. And they're only moved if they're going to a warehouse for storage. So they never actually spend time out in the elements. And I think that's a huge factor for keeping the quality of your casks, because you've got to keep them dry on the outside as much as possible. On the inside, you want them to be wet as much as possible. You don't want the inside drying out. So even when a cask is emptied, you want to be brought to your distillery as fast as possible to be filled. Inside of a cask always wet, outside dry ideally, and not too dry, you know. But in Ireland, we've got lots of moisture in the air, so they never get too dry. Anyway, what do you think of that? Do you like the single malt 29-year-old? Yeah?
Very nice. We got people saying it's very musky, very moorish, with not a super long finish, but like with water, it becomes a lot more drinkable.
Yeah, and what you might notice, it's a bit more biscuity, almost slightly drier than a pot still whiskey.
Microphone's gone. Try and put that up.
Can you hear me a bit better? 1 2 1 2 1 2. I'd say up it a bit. 1 2 1 2. Is that better?
No.
No.
Testing, testing.
1 2 1 2 1 2.
Testing, testing.
1 2 1 2. Is it coming across? Yeah, is that better? Do I need to hold it? Yeah, that's a lot better, yeah.
Testing, testing.
But yeah, what you notice about this is that it's a bit drier, a bit more biscuity on the palate. That's the difference with pot still whiskey. We'll get to the pot still in a moment and maybe talk about why pot still has more of a mouthfeel. But what I'll do now is hand over to Andrew, unless there's questions on this. Anybody got questions? Is it bad now? Cheers. We'll hand over to Andrew so to take you through a single pot still whiskey on the next.
Thank you, Eric. I know we said we'd give you 2 or 3 minutes in between, but obviously these things always run on, unfortunately. So we'll go straight into the third one before we take a break for 15 minutes so you get some refreshments. And our third and final tasting of the first phase of tonight's tasting is going to be a 17-year-old single pot still in Madeira cask. So this is where we have to cast our minds back to November 2020 when Irish Distillers brought together, I suppose, the Spot range for its final chapter, which is introducing Blue Spot into the market. So I suppose a lot of questions we often get asked in tastings is, yes, we have 7 world-renowned brands, whether it be Jameson, Redbreast, Midleton Very Rare, Powers, Knappogue, Method of Madness. I'm forgetting one. I always think I'm forgetting
The spots.
The spots. The spot. Funny that. But what we, I suppose the beauty of, I know Eric's talked a lot about distilling, but thankfully there's no blender here tonight because they say they incorporate a lot more flavour than distillers do. I'm only joking, Eric. I'm only joking. But what we're talking about is within every brand, there's a unique DNA, and that may come through casking, it may come through distillate, and so, a lot of the times it's actually a combination of the both. Within the, I suppose, the spots, which obviously Mitchell's and Sons 1805, who were, I suppose, the only bonder that continued through succession right through until, you know, Irish Distillers was formed, right through until 1988 when Pernod Ricard acquired Irish Distillers. They still got distillate from this very distillery to produce the likes of Green Spot. Now, the family itself did fall off the way around 1950s, early 1960s, where the other spots fell apart and it was only Green Spot was available in the market. And thankfully in 2020, the team at Midleton brought again back the Blue Spot, which after working closely with Jonathan and Robert Mitchell from Mitchell and Sons and working with Carol Quinn and our head of archives, looked through old ledgers to see what kind of casks we were sourcing. And one of those would have been the Madeira cask. A lot of questions also come about. It's like, oh, why is Blue Spot cask strength? Well, actually, it goes through looking at those ledgers. And what we found was out of all the spot ranges, Blue Spot was actually bottled at a slightly higher ABV than the rest of the family. So when it came to fruition, and it was ultimately Kevin and the team's job to say, I think we should bottle this at cask strength. And that's why Blue Spot to this day, we're currently on batch 5, is at cask strength. The interesting note about Madeira is, I suppose, our casks that we use are 500 litres. They're from we get them from a sawmills in the north of Portugal called Taco Bell. Hopefully there's no Americans in the room because every time I say that, it reminds me of a fast food restaurant in America. But no, it's Taco Bell. They are then transported through to Enrique and Enrique in Madeira. And the best thing to come out of Madeira is Blue Spot, not Cristiano Ronaldo. So But as soon as they come through from Taco Bell into Enrique and Enrique, we put Madeira wine into it, and the wine that we use is Tinta Negra. Now there's about 5 different grapes we can use to season these casks from Madeira, but Tinta Negra is the one that we choose to use, and that once that's finished seasoning the cask for 2 years, it's then produced onto blending other wines to create from Madeira. What's interesting about Madeira is it's a different process we use. It's called estivation, which basically means that we take some of that wine out and cook it at about 45 degrees Celsius. And as a result of that, it caramelizes the sugars within the grape. Tell I've got a chest infection.
Have a bit of water. Yeah, I was saying that earlier. When Fanon is Dr. Fanon, they'll say, any doctor in the house? And Fanon will say, give this man whiskey.
We're okay now. So, two processes in the Istvian process, which is, first of all, they take the wine, they cook it at about 45 degrees Celsius. I'm even more huskier now. People are going to be scared of me in the audience.
I can't take over here because I do not know this.
Two processes in Istvian. First is the 45 degrees Celsius heating. It actually lasts for about 3 months. And as I said, caramelizes the residual sugar coming from the wine. Once that occurs, they also take the casks, so they put it back into the cask, and they do it differently in warehouses. So a lot of warehouses in Madeira are glass fronted, which basically they're called hot warehouses. Basically means that the temperature within Madeira still keeps the temperature within the aging warehouse at about 45 degrees Celsius. So it's a constant, almost caramelization of the sugars, which intensifies the residual sugar within the wine itself. Once that's disgorged and then sold on for blending processes, they're shipped almost immediately back to Midleton Distillery, which is where we put it in the single pot still. What's unique about the spot ranges is, and we might touch on this later, within Midleton, I'm sure you all know, we make a lot of different distillate styles within our pot still. We make 3 forms, a light, a medium, and a heavy, or a trad. Fionn, relax, I know you love a trad. But what we do with only, I suppose it's the structure and the DNA within the spot ranges, the only distillate we use in the spots is MMP, which is our medium style pot still. And that's what we have in front of us this evening, which is a 17-year-old single pot still. So if we want to have a nose of this one, I've recovered, don't worry.
I'd have to call for Dr.
The ABV of this one is 57.2. All right, relax. Someone got it right. Someone got a bet up in the corner over there. Dave has a bad shoulder.
I think that was a great description. I think I can smell the Madeira. It's unbelievable.
So with me, what I get quite a lot like a treacle fudge almost on the nose.
Yeah.
Almost, yeah, it's almost like rich demerara sugar. That's one of the, and it's what something, it's, I suppose when we use a lot of fortified wines and a lot of our different expressions, what you'll notice within the aging processes of the fortified wine is quite similar. So if we look at likes of Red Spot, we use Marsala, and Marsala goes through an almost similar process than Madeira, which is called mostocato, and that basically means they take about 1/3 of the wine out and cook it to intensify the sugars, put that back in. But with Madeira, it's a general heating of the overall wine. It is.
There's a winey note coming.
It is,
through,
but
isn't
it's
there?
almost like a high tannin quality as well from the European oak. So the oak that is used within to make the 500-litre casks is Iberian oak.
Corcus perennica.
Corcus perennica. Thank you for the species name. I was never going to get that one. But you also get like almost quite a lot of exotic fruits as well. I'm getting like notes of kiwi right at the very end. A little bit of melon. And if we want to have a taste. The throat is much better now, thank you.
Tell them the strength.
Do they know the strength?
Oh, do they?
It's actually not as high an ABV as we'd think on the palate. I think that residual sugar that's intensified within the process of the estrogen actually heightens the sugar quality, and almost on the palate, it doesn't shine through. And that is the beauty of how we, I suppose, play about with flavour and play about with sugar quality. Within Madeira, they do make a number of Madeira wines ranging from dry to sweet. What we actually use is a semi-sweet, so it's about 90 grams of sugar per litre in the wine that we use. And it truly is a unique and special whiskey. And as I said, within the whole genesis of the Spots ranges, it always is a combination of ex-bourbon cask, ex-Oloroso sherry cask, and other forms, whether it be the yellow spot, we use Malaga, with red spot, we use Marsala, and with blue spot, we use Madeira. But it's a combination of all three. Obviously, green spot is only bourbon and sherry. But the uniqueness through them all is it's all this medium pot still style, which is synonymous in Midleton for giving quite orchard fruits, quite a lot of, and don't shoot me down here, but I kind of say the spots is like, it's almost like Ronseal. It does exactly what it says in the tin. When you look at green, you get green apple. When you look at red, you get red apple. When you look at blue, thankfully there's no blue apples out there.
Blue apple.
Blue apple. It depends how late at night it is. But with blue, you're getting almost this fudginess from it, I suppose, and it's that rich Demerara sugar, as you said, like rum-like qualities, without the aguardiente.
And they're famous for rum as well in Madeira. I think.
Madeira, yes. A lot of rum casks would be seasoned in Madeira and then transferred over to the likes of Barbados, Guatemala, etc. So again, it's about enticing the sugar content within the fortification process within the barrel, so it gets a lot of sugars, and that's how you add a lot of sweetness to your distillate.
Yes, indeed.
You ready to go? So, thank you, Brían. I've got the headmaster over here. Any questions on that before we break? Speak now, forever hold thy peace. It's not COVID. I've done 5 tests, trust me. My little man had God knows what last week, and now I've got it. But thank you so much, everyone. We're going to take a 15-minute break. There's going to be refreshments at the bar. And we'll be back here at 9 o'clock, and I'll have a new throat, don't worry.
They're off, I think, are they? Yeah, we'll just hold on to them.
Of course.
They're off.
hang on. Hello. Hey, walk down there with you. Hello. Can you hear it? Morning, sorry, just this is having issues.
Oh, so that's why
Yeah.
you didn't get his phone number, did you?
Why is it dropping? Yeah, awesome.
When I get Damien, which of them? Oh, when I get Damien? On Brían said they couldn't hear on that side. That's why he said up the volume, they couldn't hear anything.
Hello.
Then it's like connecting there. Try again, Jack. Yeah, it is. It's connected now.
Yeah.
I heard it then, Jack. I wonder if it should be keep it up high or something. Yeah, look. I just close out the back of it. We just kept so we look for the guy who did that was a problem to be so
It's just someone waved at us there and it's dropped. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah. No, like either we can fix it or we don't do it. Yeah. Sorry. Would it be possible to have it even down there? Yeah. Because I have to be able to. Yeah. Hello.
I want you to.
Hello.
Things can go on and on and on. And as I said earlier,
Hello.
sometimes a 15-minute whiskey, you're like, that's a long time. Then you start talking, it's like, that's a long time.
1, 2.
When you stop talking, that's okay. They'll start. You know what I mean? And they'll have a little chat. And
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
Aye.
I'll get back on shortly. And we'll do 45 minutes. The last 3, then we'll go straight into the raffle. And
Yeah.
I might take Eric's mic.
Yeah.
And ask you to draw, and I'll
Yeah.
ask you to draw, and we'll do the idea once, and then I'll carry on with the rest if that's okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Ready to go? Welcome back to the second part of this evening's tasting. There's Westlife away to do. Well, where are you going? Oh, hello. Good evening and welcome back. So we're going to kick off into the final three samples this evening. I suppose the next one we're going to jump into is the first three we've tasted cask samples that we have selected from the Midleton Distillery. This one we're going to showcase the final piece, and our fourth tasting this evening is Redbreast 27. So this will be batch number 5, so the current or last year's batch. And I suppose keeping in line with what we've done with the last sample, we're staying in 2020, and unfortunately we actually done a launch here the night before Leo Varadkar shut the entire country down. But we won't mention Voldemort, so we'll keep it PG. And I suppose when we talk about the Redbreast brand in general, we often refer to it as very sherry forward, sherry driven. And I suppose when I do a lot of tastings, yes, sherry is a huge component. It was obviously the story of WNA and Gilbey's, which were bonders in Upper Sackville Street. And you would have came on horse and cart to this very distillery itself and got new make distillate put into it, single pot still new make distillate, before being aged in the likes of their Harcourt Street warehouse. And as a result, in 1912, the Redbreast, I suppose, name came to fruition. Throughout that time in 1991, Irish Distillers resurrected under the watchful eye of Master Blender Emeritus Billy Lighton and resurrected Redbreast 12. And throughout the years, we've added and progressed the family. And I suppose we were very proud in 2020 to be, I suppose, one of the first Irish whiskey companies in Ireland to produce a 27-year-old, but not just producing a 27-year-old, a permanent expression. And that goes down to, I suppose, the relationships that we've built throughout the years, whether it be with our Antonio Paez Labato cooperage in Jerez de la Frontera, which we get a lot of our sherry casks from. And a lot of people, often say, yes, 27 years old, but if we look at the actual composition, it's about 27 to 31-year-old whiskies, single pot still whiskies, within the composition of Redbreast 27. And that truly is down to one of the times I was went to the blending lab in Midleton. You do have to get special access, and thankfully Dave McCabe gave me that. Yep, and you go. And in I went, and obviously when you look at their computer systems, it's a bit more complex than Excel. And when I looked at their system, it says 2020. When was I there? I was there last year, so it's 2023, and it was looking at 2063. And it's all about forecasting what they need to produce to this day to be able to replicate Redbreast 12, Redbreast 15, now Redbreast 18, Lustau, PX, permanent expression, cask strength, 21-year-old, and obviously 27. But if we take a nose of 27, and I suppose to talk about what makes 27 stand out, within every expression of Redbreast, we change the complexity. Now, as I said earlier about the spots, we focus on our medium style pot still. With Redbreast, especially in the younger ages, we usually focus on a light and medium style pot stills, and it's a combination of both of those, predominantly in first fill casks, whether that be sherry, bourbon, or PX with the now PX edition as part of the Iberian series. As we go through the ages in Redbreast, like so 15, we actually start using more refill casks, so B2s and B3s, to make the distillate shine through. And obviously, we want to make more different characteristics and different nuances within the expressions that we're creating. With 21, it's the first time we add trad pot into the mix. And yes, I know, a lot of people's favourites, trad pot, but that's more so when we look at Redbreast 27. And Redbreast 27 is a combination of 3 casks. First fill bourbon, so B1, first fill Oloroso sherry cask, and a first fill Ruby port cask. And there is a trad pot component within those casks as well. So if we want to have a nose of this one, for me, I get like a beach in Barbados. I get pineapple, I get guava, I get quite a lot of exotic fruits. Passion fruit mango. But as you keep on going into it, I get actually quite a lot of like old characteristics, a lot of leather, what I would call like black lace licorice is what I get. A lot of tannin coming to the forefront. And it truly, for me, this truly is a unicorn whiskey that we're able to produce day in, well, not day in, day out, but we can produce it batch in, batch out. So this is batch 5. Batch 5. If we want to have a taste, Sláinte. Batch 5 being 54.6% ABV. It's a beautiful mouthfeel. It coats the entire palate. There's a lot of, it's like a dryness, but then it gives the sweetness from the bourbon element, but then it rounds it all off with the ruby port inclusion as well. And ruby port, as opposed to the likes of tawny port that we used in a limited release for the Redbreast range, ruby port adds a lot more of fresh red fruits. When you go into tawny port, you're adding a lot more oxidization in that port element, so you're getting a lot more dried tannin, whereas this, it's like a bursting of sweet tannin on the palate. And I suppose I might hand over to Eric to talk about the difference in terms of how unique trad pot is, because I know a lot of fans within the Midleton Distillery collection talk about trad pot as being the go-to in terms of distillate styles, but it's within the Redbreast. It's actually a combination of all three, or maybe sometimes 1 and 2, and how trad pot influenced flavor profile throughout.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to quantify. Redbreast typically is mod pot and light pot maybe, and then for more like the more premium expressions, I suppose, maybe some trad pot. We have to be choosy of how we use that trad pot. It's a bit like the rye. We only make small volumes of it every year. Yeah, so it's kind of we call them campaigns, and it's you know, from week to week we're making mod pot, we're making light pot, but it's kind of special when you're making other distillates, be that trad pot or be that rye or be that whatever. What do I think it brings? It's kind of a wider cut. It's the most traditional, I suppose, distillate we make. It's most like what they would have been doing back pre-1960s, I would say. And by widening it, I think what it does is it brings in probably more mouthfeel, if we're talking about mouthfeel, but also a kind of a leathery aspect, and maybe an earthiness, slight waxiness kind of thing. So Fionnán again, probably got all these tasting terms off of Fionnán anyway, but it is sometimes hard to quantify it. It's not so much fruity, it's not so much spicy, it's something else, and it's something kind of unique to pot still, I would say, some of those flavors, and they're hard to describe at times, and it kind of just adds a bit more depth to the flavor of the whiskey that you're going to put out there. So the ideal scenario is like this. You can get that light pot can help to bring in more of that kind of fragrance and more kind of fresh fruits maybe. The mod pot can bring more of those kind of exotic fruits, and then your trad pot can bring more of that kind of backbone and waxiness and mouthfeel, I think, really. So by changing the ratio, you can create what you want to create. And I think with Redbreast 27, it's, and probably, you know, the port cask as well, for me, some of my favorite whiskey in Midleton. If I was to pick something, I'd take a 27, 28, 29-year-old, 30-year-old port cask and head off to an island, and I'd be happy. It's
lucky for some, isn't it? Yeah.
But it really is, it brings, I love the depth that you get from the port casks. It's different, especially when they get older.
It's like an intensification of the red fruit compound.
Yeah, and you still get that fruity wine flavor. I kind of get plum, like a fleshy plum, even at something that's that old. So that also has a big influence on this. So like the beauty of Midleton, I suppose, is that for blenders is that you've got this huge array of flavors that you can bring together to create something new. And that's how we're able to create so many different expressions. You've got malt whiskey in the warehouse, you've got pot still whiskey in the warehouse, you've got grain whiskey, you've got rye whiskey, not as much, but a little bit of it. You've got smaller volumes of other type whiskey, like even oats, dominant on wheat, and we haven't even touched that yet. But then on top of that, then you have all these different types of casks, and then you've got virgins, first fills, second fills, third fills. there's literally thousands of flavour profiles out there, you know. So
Thank God for Excel.
yeah.
Yeah, thank God for Excel. But the more and more I go back to it, it's like cherry menthol, a little bit of like chili oil. It keeps on giving, and that's what
Evolving, yeah.
Redbreast 27 is all about. Is anyone
People online are saying blackcurrant, we got tobacco.
almost like fig leaf as well? So it was one of the tasting notes I get quite a lot from it. But it's literally it keeps on going, and the depth of flavour and aroma is truly sensational.
And if you've ever tried the Kentucky Oak edition of Redbreast, it gives you a good idea of what American oak brings. American oak is very important to Redbreast. We always talk about the sherry casks and the sherry influence, but if you did them on their own, and you've probably tasted some of the single casks, it's quite different. So when you add in the American oak, I talked about Quercus alba, it brings a softness, it rounds it up. So it kind of dovetails nicely with the tannins that bring structure and a dryness, but you bring them together and you get that balance just right. And I think you can make it better than the sum of the parts. I think for me, when you blend different types of pot still together, most of the time it's a better pot still whiskey, in my opinion, than if you just have something from a single cask. So blenders are very important. Everyone talks about blenders are very important in Scotland, but for me, they're very important in Ireland as well.
And it's something you keep on echoing in tastings and tastings. It's like Redbreast sherry. But just to echo what Eric said, is like, for me, the bourbon quality within, and bourbon is quite a large proportion within the whole composition of all the Redbreast ranges. It's the infrastructure, it's the foundations, like a new building. And I suppose the sherry components, the fortified wine components are your fascia, your guttering, your double deluxe windows and all that sort of thing. And that's kind of what it does. It adds and rounds off the overall whiskey. And we've tasted single casks before, and I suppose that's what's synonymous with Midleton Distillery, is a lot of single casks that you might see in the market may have spent their first 4 to 6 years in a B2 or a B3. And it's not to overpower the distillate with too much of the, I suppose, caramel butterscotch toffee that you would get from a B1, but it's almost to mellow the distillate, but give it a rounded character before going into the likes of a first fill Oloroso or a first fill Marsala in the case of likes of the spot ranges. And that is the beauty of, I suppose, the plethora of casks that we have in Midleton, is we can change the course and direction of a cask. It doesn't always have to be one bespoke flavour profile, and that is the beauty of it. Any questions on 27 before we go on to our next sample? No? I hope you all enjoy it. And Eric, over to you, to Midleton Very Rare Dark Gaelach.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So yeah, we're moving on to the MVR, the Midleton Very Rare brand, the pinnacle of what we do in Midleton Distillery, and probably my favourite of what we do with Midleton, other than Silent Distillery, of course. But
have you got to taste it?
Yeah, that's part of the job, thank God.
Not your job.
But, you know, of what's available out there at a reasonable price for reasonable people and not millionaires, let's say, I think Dair Gaelach is amazing. I was very excited, it must be many years ago now, when we were laying down in Irish oak, because I studied brewing and distilling many years ago, and I did my dissertation on oak maturation, and I never included Irish oak, because Irish oak just simply wasn't a thing. I never thought we could even have Irish oak as an option for maturing whiskey in. So it was fantastic then to realize you can actually mature whiskey in Irish oak. Obviously, it must have been a thing at some point, probably died out by the early 1800s. So it's great to have it even in small volumes, and it's not just us. There's a few other distilleries in Ireland doing it, and hopefully in the future we'll see a bit more of it. The particular expression we have in front of us is the 5th edition of Dair Gaelach, and it's from Wicklow, and it's Kilranelagh wood in Wicklow. So we've done Kilkenny twice, I think. We've done Laois, Wicklow before, and now Wicklow again. Different forests. You probably know the whole story and the whole background with Dair Gaelach, in that you can literally go back to the actual tree, which I think might be unique in the whiskey world. and that, you know, in this edition we have 6 trees, sometimes we had 9, I think, with Grinzel's wood back in the day. And what it is really is that we bring a parcel of whiskey that's already matured in Midleton and then put it into these casks that have been produced for us. So let's say in the case of Kilranelagh, it was 6 trees. They were cut down. The trees would have been tracked from when they were cut down, so they would have been numbered, tracked all the way through. So they would have been sent to Spain and basically to Madderbar. Second oak generally would have some form of kiln drying, maybe some air seasoning, some of them, but some are just kiln drying, I should say. Whereas when you're in Europe, it tends to be air drying, and it takes longer. So in the case of this, I think it was 18 months, sometimes it's 2 years, depends on the conditions. But if you think of southern Spain, perfect conditions for drying out. So you're bringing down, what you want to do is bring down that moisture content that's in the wood. So if you brought that wood to your mill, cut it into staves and try to build a barrel straight away, and if you manage to do that, you then put your distiller in, you're going to get none of the flavors that we associate with maturation in wooden casks. What you'll get is resinous, adhesive, green, stalky, rotten flavors. It's the I suppose the air seasoning that reduces down the tannins. You need tannins, but not too much. And also when you go to the cooperage, in order to bend that, like the cask here, into that shape, if you try to do it when it's too dry, it'll actually crack and split. So I suppose at some point the Celts would have been the original people who designed this type of cask. They realized soon enough that you got to actually heat the wood, and when you heat the wood, it'll actually bend without splitting. And then they used to use reeds to keep it in shape. Eventually it became metal. But the bonus of that is that you change the structure of the wood, and you change the chemical composition of the wood compounds. So what you do is you create flavors. Things like the wood sugars that are in there, they get cooked basically, and produces all those lovely flavors that we know, like caramel and toffee and treacle and that the kind of wood flavors. Esters get created, tannins get softened. So the tannins are there, and I mentioned earlier on, tannins are important. Too many tannins is bad, the right level is good, but also air seasoning reduces and softens the tannins, but also the heat treatment does the same thing. So it's all very, very important. And in the case of the Irish oak, it would have went through all of that process, and then it would have went to a cooperage, Antonio Paez Labato cooperage in Jerez or Jerez, whichever way you want to pronounce it, and they would have produced the casks, hogshead casks, which would be 225 litre in capacity. And normally when they make casks for us, they put sherry into the casks, but in the case of these casks, they're sent straight back to Midleton. And when they came into Midleton for this edition, we put in a wide selection of distillates actually. Light pot, mod pot, trad pot, B1s, B2s and B3s. Predominantly B1s and B2s, but the whole repertoire really went into this. So the age profile, I think, was 15 to 25 years for the actual whiskies. All of this would have been, brought together in a tank, and then when the cask came in, it was filled into the cask. So you already had this very interesting, mature, single pot still whiskey that went into the Dair Gaelach casks and had a finish in the Kilranelagh wood casks, while at the same time all of this was tracked. So we could say what we have in front of us is 3-1. We had another batch then will be 3-2, so they'll all be done individually, which I think is amazing. I believe you can go back to some of these forests and find a stump which still has the number if you're lucky enough to have 3-1 and sitting on it. I did a tasting earlier this year with Kevin O'Gorman and Finbar Curran and Mairead Calnan, where we went through all of the trees and we took our notes. And I remember this 3-1 had the most colour. So all of the colour is natural from the wood. That means it's probably after getting the biggest impact from the Irish oak. So it has the greatest degree of colour. Anyway, that's kind of the background. That gives you what it is. The finish, I think, was a year. Can't remember now exactly. 12 to 18, isn't it? Yeah, so there's a bit of a, some of it was a year, some of it was about a year and a half. So anyway, have a little nose. Thanks for your patience. So the species was Quercus robur. If you're talking about a European oak, it tends to be Quercus robur, and you could have Quercus perennica, as you said, from Portugal there we had earlier on, Quercus petraea. In France, they tend to have Quercus petraea and Quercus robur. Eastern Europe, more Quercus petraea. This is Quercus robur, so it's European oak, but grown in Ireland, of course. And the thing about Quercus robur is it's high in tannins, so that's the first thing compared to let's say American oak, Quercus alba. It's also, I think there's more spice. So if you're nosing this, I kind of get a little bit of clove and cinnamon, more so than I do with American oak. Especially when it's at that higher strength, you're getting more of those wood flavors. It's kind of sweet and chocolatey, is what I always notice as well. I don't know if you get almond, kind of walnut, nuts. Kind of I'm getting chocolatey nuts kind of thing. And I always get that with the Dair Gaelach. And like looking back at all the previous editions, they were all Quercus robur. So they all have something in similar, the same type of tree, the same species to finish in. If you go back to Grinzel's wood, I remember Grinzel's wood was like a big smack across the head with nuts and chocolate, even more than this. Probably because we did, I think it was medium to heavy toast. This one is a medium toast, so dial back a little bit. But some of the other editions we did a light toast, and we did, can't remember exactly which, but light to medium as well. So we're playing around with the toasting levels, and that will change the kind of flavor. But as you know, as it now actually, it starts moving away, probably moving into the fruitier aspect that's in there, and that's even a cask strength. So this is 57%. Excuse me, I'm getting a bit what you had a while ago. Anyway, let's have a taste. See what you think. You've probably done it already. Oh man. First of all, when I put it in my mouth, I got chocolate. And then I think I got a hint of the nuts, a little bit of a fruity, and then at the end it's this big spice, boom. And the finish is quite good. But did you notice it's a bit dry on the finish? That's the tannins, and that's the high degree of tannins that you have in Quercus robur. Tannins, just to be a bit nerdy, I know half of you are probably nerds as well. Tannins, everyone thinks tannins are just for maybe give you that kind of dryness or that kind of mouth puckering, and that's all it does. Tannins are very important to whiskey. What happens with tannins, you need tannins if you want to create a good whiskey. Tannins go into the cask. And what happens is they actually react with metals, transitional metals they're called. And in the case of distillate, you've got little ions of copper from your still. So they react together, and they react with oxygen. And what they create is activated oxygen. And what you need for oxidation, you might have heard of that, is activated oxygen. It's not just oxygen, it's activated oxygen. And in order to have that, you need tannins, and you need a transitional metal, which is the copper. So then you get oxidation. And what happens is with the flavors that are in there, whether they're from the distillate, whether they're from the wood, they start evolving, and they actually improve with time. So something that might be like apple in the first couple of years might end up like pineapple. So it gets more flavorful. So what tannins actually do is they bring complexity. I mentioned that earlier on. So you get more complexity with time if you've got enough tannins. So that's something it brings. And I think it works with the Dair Gaelach and other. Maybe you're talking about Redbreast with the European oak. I think it helps with that as well. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm going to put in a few drops of water just to see. There's nothing wrong with adding water, you know. Yeah, I just got asked the question, what do we do with casks? Well, we fill them again. So we'll probably do something in the future. But, you know, we've used Irish oak for Jameson. Anyway, no, that's okay. We've used it for Jameson single pot still.
Oh, yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that. So don't need to tell me to. Anyway,
It's like something else coming up now.
is there something else? Yeah, don't worry. I'm just talking about Jameson single pot still. But anyway, so we'd fill them again, and we leave them in the warehouse, and we might use them for something, but we're not going to just get rid of the casks. So, like as I said, first fill, second fill, third fill. So if it came in as a virgin, you could use it another time. You can maybe use it another 2 times after that. You know, so we definitely use it. Anyway, when you add the water, some people are like, oh, don't add the water. Why not? You know, like what we do in the distillery, in order to really kind of get to know a whiskey when they're doing tasting, we bring it down to 20%. Now that's no good for drinking, but it releases all of the flavors, everything that's in there. So all of the esters, everything, if there's something bad in there, it releases it. And that's how we know. So when you add water, you're releasing flavors. So those, when I'm nosing this now, I mentioned pineapple earlier on, getting a little bit of that, getting a touch of kiwi. I'm getting the esters. I wasn't getting them earlier. When you're at cask strength, you're getting mostly wood flavors. Because when I was talking to you earlier on, it was nuts and chocolate and spice. That's wood-derived flavors. Most of that comes from toasting of the cask. European oak casks are toasted. When you add the water, you're now getting the fermentation flavors predominantly, which is the lighter kind of esters, and it makes it happen faster. So if you had the cask strength and you kept it cupped for a long time, you're going to release them. But if you want to do it faster, add a few drops of water. And there's citrus there now, and there's apple. So it's all coming along in waves. It's a sign of a good whiskey. I'm going to have a little sip. Just before I hand over to Andrew.
Are you?
Yeah, actually, I was at a tasting. By the way, I was a Whiskey Society member for a few years, many moons ago. I used to come up. I was a member of the Irish Whiskey Society. I came up to some of these tastings as a guest, paying guest, many years ago. And I remember after one, we went to a whiskey bar in this. I won't say which one, but I think Leo might have been there and Finan maybe. We went to this whiskey bar, and I went up and asked for a selection of whiskies from Midleton, and I said, can I have a little jug of water with that, please? And the bartender said to me, you don't want a jug of water. And I kind of look at the lads behind me, and they were all laughing. And I said, why don't I want a glass? Why don't I want water? He said, you want to drink the whiskey the way the distiller wants you to drink it. I said, I am the distiller. But genuinely, what it means is like, some people like to add a drop of water, some people don't. You don't ever tell anybody how they should have their whiskey. And we leave that to other countries that want to get snobby over whiskey. Drink the whiskey the way you want to drink the whiskey. And that's just the way it should be done. But anyway, I think this is an amazing whiskey. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll hand over to Andrew. Unless there's questions, I'll hand over to Andrew.
No, we don't have time for questions, sorry.
No. Actually, sorry. I'm actually doing the last one.
I know you are, but I can introduce you. It's fine. You're doing it. I suppose I hope you've all enjoyed the tasting so far this evening. And I suppose a little bit of insight into how we work. I suppose, about 7 months back and forward to Brían. Sometimes there might be 4 or 5 weeks in between because we're busy and other things. But as part of organising one of these tastings, I suppose to get cask components, from Midleton Distillery, I have to email the blending lab, which obviously is headed up by Dave McCabe, our master blender, Bruna Kelly, and Deirdre O'Connell, who's part of the three of them make a fantastic blending team. And this time of year is almost like something to my head. I won't say what, but something to my head, because it's like, can I get this? Can I get that? Can I? And you're expected in your face on a dartboard in the blending lab, being like, would this boy leave me alone? Leave me alone. But thankfully, Bruna came back to myself and Eric once Eric had agreed to come and co-host this with me this evening. And they actually originally came to us with, we've got beautiful 31-year-old grain. And I can't take any credit for it, even though as much as I give Eric stick. He says, well, we're in the home of Jameson. Why don't we make a bespoke blend? So our sixth and final tasting this evening is truly unique, bespoke blend from the blending team, which is a combination of a 31-year-old grain and a 31-year-old MMP, so a medium-style pot still. We refer in Midleton LPM, light pot Midletons, or lightest style, synonymous to Powers and Redbreast to a certain extent. MMP1, which would be our mod pots, or a medium style, synonymous to Jameson, Redbreast, and Spots. Thank you, Eric. And then obviously our MMP4, which we would clarify as our trad pot or a heavy style pot still. This is a combination of a 31-year-old grain and a 31-year-old single pot still, medium style pot still, to, I suppose, come back to the home of Jameson. So this truly is a one-of-a-kind, unique sample you're going to taste this evening, that no better place to taste it than in Bow Street Distillery. So I'll give him his light. I'll give Wes life his time on stage.
I just want to say, I love my job. I was like, I would love to taste this, so I just like say it. And oh yeah, okay. I was like, brilliant, because this, I was just thinking, this is something I'd love to taste, and we get to taste it tonight. A 31-year-old Jameson blend, really, and especially for us. So anyway, let's get to know it a little bit and have a nose. So 31 years, that's a long time. Actually, when was that laid down?
93, because I'm 32.
Slightly younger than yourself.
He said old whiskies earlier. I was like, how dare you? How dare you?
But anyway, what I can say, it was the grain whiskey and the pot still whiskey, they were both laid down in bourbon casks. So ex-bourbon, what we would call B1s, way back in 1993. So let's have a nose and see what we think. Is that American oak, which it should be, coming across in a big way? It's a bit different, let's say, to Jameson. Jameson has a bit of a sherry influence, small bit of sherry cask, whereas this is all American oak. Kind of a cross between, I suppose, Powers Gold and Jameson, because Powers Gold would be all American oak, whereas Jameson would be a little bit of the European oak. But it does come across as less chocolatey, let's say, when you compare it to the European oak. I often get cinnamon. I always think of whenever old American oak whiskies, pot still, even single malt, it reminds me of Halloween or something when I'm nosing it. It's kind of like this ginger and pumpkin spice and kind of slight nuttiness, and that toasty oak, that toastiness, that kind of, because there's a fire in the background, but it's not dominating. Kind of a good whiskey for that time of the year, I think. And I think because this is at cask strength, this is 54.5%, all of those flavors are wood flavors. When you have it at cask strength, I feel if you do like cask strength, you love wood. And if you want a bit more fruitiness, you should be going for a younger whiskey, or you should be adding water to your whiskey if it's cask strength, because now you're going back to that kind of distillate flavor, that fermentation flavor. So it just depends on what you prefer yourself. But you can have it both ways. You can start off with the wood flavors, add your water, and then get those fermentation flavors and the kind of fruitiness and maybe the fragrance that's there from the distillate, even with a whiskey that's 31 years old. I think that's amazing. You know, your fermentation happened 31 years ago. You add a couple of drops of water and you're bringing back those flavors. It's amazing. The ABV is 54.5%. I'm going to have a sip. Slánta.
You raise me up. Sorry.
I should have a seat. I just had to.
He loves the walkabout.
Very spicy again. And that's wood spices plus alcohol. We talk about pot still having soft spices, but when you get a big whack of spices, it's normally when it's at that higher strength, because alcohol has that same effect. So I'm going to add a drop of water. I know some of you don't like that, but when you're doing a tasting, you're trying to see the whiskey at all, I suppose, angles. One angle is at cask strength, one angle is with water. If we were doing it in the distillery, it would be with a lot of water. So we'd bring it down to 20% ABV. So 20% ABV is great for nosing. It's very bad for tasting because you've ruined the mouthfeel. And I just have to give it a little bit of time to open up. What I often notice is when it first starts opening up, it sends up a lot of spices, especially cinnamon when it's American oak for me. So I can tell you what this is. It's 60% grain, 40% pot still. So you might notice if you've tried grain whiskies of this age, all of the flavor comes from the wood nearly, because the grain whiskey is so delicate. So if you put in a delicate grain whiskey in the quintessential style, which is in this, we call it G11. It's maize or corn, and it's malted barley. But as a distillate, it's sweet. I actually prefer maize grain whiskey actually, and when I compared it to wheat grain whiskey, let's say they're the two main styles. Maize tends to give you a sweeter profile, little bit fragrant, slightly floral, but very soft. You put that into casks for a number of years, it's not going to stand up. So it tends to be the wood. So especially at the cask strength, it reminds me of a grain. But I'd say adding the water will open up the pot still a bit more. Actually, even nosing it now, it's starting to release some of the orchard fruits. Little bit of the apple, maybe pear. I think there's kind of an orange peel kind of a thing coming through as well. Kind of green fruits. I don't know. Kind of melon and kiwis. But again, none of that was there when I was nosing it at the cask strength. You know, so if you really look, nobody sits down at home and starts going, I'm getting lemon, and I'm getting. It's when you want. Yeah. Well, I did do it myself. I remember being at home and I'd sit down with my notepad. I'm trying to train myself, and I'd sit down with a whiskey doing it. And if you're doing that and you're trying to train yourself, well, you have to add water. Even at 40%, add a drop of water. If you're just having a whiskey to enjoy, you don't have to worry about that shit. Excuse me. You just say, that's nice, and carry on. But if you're trying to do tasting notes, you have to get everything you can out of it. So then you should be adding drops of water. And if it's about trying to see if I like this whiskey or not, next time you come back to the whiskey, you're going to know, well, I like that at the strength it was at, or I liked it with a drop of water. So it's simple as that, you know.
People online are saying that it's fantastic, it tastes like Christmas, that it's definitely worthy of using the fancy glass. And if they hadn't had Midleton Very Rare, it would have been just completely mind-blowing.
It does come across as Midleton Very Rare, actually. It's delicate. It's kind of no one flavor is dominating. It's got a little bit of fruit, a little bit of spice, a little bit of that nutty quality. But Midleton Very Rare tends to be more light pot and trad pot, not so much mod pot, you know. But it's got the grain whiskey. So that grain whiskey is coming across, and that's why it makes me think of Midleton Very Rare.
It's also important to notice I suppose the time it spends in cask as well changes the character of the overall distillate. Because speaking to Dave and the blending team, it's like when we came to market with the likes of Jameson Black Barrel, which hopefully everyone here loves and knows. Thank you very much, Ben, in the back there, sir, with the thumb up. But you know that was a lot of trials and experience in terms of, yes, we make Black Barrel is one of the most complex whiskies we produce in Midleton in terms of the amount of parcels that go into the overall composition. One of those is just a bit like a trad pot. It's a unique style of grain that we only make 2 weeks of the year in the distillery. And it goes into, I suppose, alligator charred casks, or what we would call double charred casks from Kentucky. And as a result of that, over time and over a resting period, they found that 7 years was the peakness of sweetness and I suppose caramel and vanilla and all the compounds you would expect to come from a double charred bourbon cask. Once it goes over that 7-year threshold, you're losing all the sweetness and you're getting a lot of the wood derivative. So it's the part of making whiskies is all a balancing act. What do you want to achieve? And I suppose the beauty of this is, Eric's just said, it's a 60% grain, 40% pot still MMP, and both first fill bourbons.
Yes.
Both in B1 casks. So it's a combination of playing on ratios to see what uniqueness and what qualities we want to get out of the overall distillate. And that is the beauty of the blend at the end of the day. And I suppose it's a homage to a very special occasion that we're hosting this evening. And I hope you all enjoy what you've tasted so far. So.
Yeah, I think you might notice as well, because there's so much grain whiskey, it doesn't have that same mouthfeel as you have with the pot still. It's got great qualities, but some of the pot stills we had that lingering kind of viscosity on the palate, that creaminess that people talk about, and you know, I don't think the malt had it, and I don't think the blend has it because there's less of that pot still. But it has different qualities, and it depends really what you prefer. My favorite thing about whiskey, probably number 1 would be the nose, and number 2 would be the mouthfeel. The actual taste is my third, and that's why I like pot still so much. It's got such a wonderful aroma and such an unusual and enjoyable mouthfeel. And it actually comes back to the malting process. So in malting, it destroys some of the fatty acids. And those fatty acids, eventually, if you keep them, as you do with unmalted barley, those fatty acids will become things called long-chain fatty esters. I mentioned about that earlier on. And those are the things that actually come through to the end, and you can detect it on your tongue. You don't want to chill filtrate either, because chill filtration will take them out. So most of our pot still is non-chill filtered, so it allows it to come through. And really, it's because we don't malt the barley, and that mouthfeel comes from the unmalted barley that you use. I hope maybe we kind of you might have learned something maybe tonight from a few of these things that we've done. And if you have any questions now, maybe we might take them.
No questions. At the end, headmaster's looking over my shoulder here.
So anyway, thanks very much for being so attentive. And best of luck in the raffle.
Look, we'll do our closing speeches at the end. We're nearly just over time a little bit, which is very good. I'm going to pass over to Brían, who's going to do the raffles, and then we will finish very, very shortly.
Thanks very much. Eric, don't go too far, because I'm going to ask you to do some of the draws. So what we have here, yes. So thank you all, both in person, online, and members as well, for getting involved in the raffle. And the proceeds of the raffle is going to go to the Caption Day Centre, which is just down the street here on Bow Street, the Caption Centre for the Homeless. So far, just on the raffle alone, you have raised €3,814. And we've been given a lot of prizes. Some of the prizes we've drawn from the IWS cellar. Other prizes have been donated. And so what I'm going to do is we have in here all of the we have something like 980 individual tickets with names. I have the names here. So I'm going to ask Eric to draw the first one, and then we'll match it to the name. And this is for the Midleton Dair Gaelach Batch 1 39 bottle number 2358. And the number is
285.
And I'll tell you who 285 is now. 285 is Dave Mulligan. So if you're here, fine. Hey, congratulations. And for those that win that are not here, we'll have it shipped out to you. Okay, so now we have number 2 is Powers, single pot still, single cask, 16-year-old.
228.
228.
That's the same person, is it? Fix.
2 is Tanya Dean. Yes, I do know Tanya Dean. The third prize is Redbreast 10 cask strength birdhouse release.
713.
And 713. Hang on now. There we go. Hands free. What was the number again?
713.
Alex Sushiu. I'm going to ask somebody else to pull the next one. Thanks, sorry. No. So the next, number 4 is 17-year-old single malt Mizunara finish from Glendalough. So I'm going to ask Kieran Rooney, if he's in the house, if you can jump up and draw the ticket on behalf of Glendalough, who very kindly donated this prize. And if you just tell me what the number is. 850. Hang on a second. 850. Mark McGillian.
Okay. You want me to call Mike? I can look through them.
And
Go on that side. He can look at it.
oh, I see what you mean. Right, yes.
Yeah. It'll be faster.
That will be faster, right? The next one then is for a Glendalough double barrel. We're going to hand back to Rowdy. A Glendalough double barrel, new release from Glendalough, 61.3 grain whiskey. That is 937.
Pat Purcell.
And that's Pat Purcell. Pat Purcell's not here, and that was the first cask strength, wasn't it? Or was and okay, for another cask strength from Glendalough. Thanks, Kira. And that is Matthew Gregg. Hey. Woo. And if Peter White is there, because Dick Max donated a bottle to celebrate the 125th anniversary. And so this is Dick Mac's 125th anniversary bottling from the Powers Court Distillery. And that is 765. And Paul Brosnan. We have it here for you. Next up, we have a gift pack from Slane Distillery, which is a bottle of Slane signed by Alex Connaughton and 2 branded glasses. And let's see, can I volunteer to pick? There we go. Yes, if you pick your own, we're in serious trouble.
731.
731.
Kind of. Shut up, Eric. Owen McGrain.
Owen McGrain. Thank you very much. Now, Brian Green, if you could join us up here. Brian Green was very generous in putting together a selection of whiskies from his own collection. These are 20 mil samples of historic escapes me every time.
Historic vodka.
So for the Jameson pack, if you'd like to draw a number there. Which,
this box, is this?
this one here, yes.
Just one.
Just the one, yeah. And the number is 874.
You should tell them what's in that pack.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a Jameson 3-star, then Jameson liqueur Dublin whiskey, that's a 12-year-old pot still. Then it moves into a blend, so a JJ12 blend, and then a Crested 10, so they'd all be the era from this.
But that's 1960s, 1970s, 1960s. Like that's the era
Then to
stuff.
top it off, there's a Bow Street 18-year-old, so the one that's matured here, so there's a cast strength version. Of
It's serious.
So nice little lineup.
And the winner is Niall Duffy.
Whoa!
So the Jameson, there we go. And next one up is the Powers. You want to see what's in this?
Okay, so next is the Powers. So there's a Powers pot still. So if anyone wants to go over to Thomas Street, just walk in and pretend you're an art student, or just wave at the security guys, and they'll let you in. And they've actually redone the stills. So IDL went and I think assisted with the project, so they look stunning. So this is John Power Dublin whiskey pot still. The next one is another.
What era?
This one, that one's probably about
Early 1960s,
60s, yeah.
1960s, 1960s, 1980s.
Yes. So then the next one is another one which was always a little bit of a debate about whether it was a pot still or not, but we're pretty confident it's a pot.
Sorry,
So this whiskey is 7 years old. So we were, remember that one here. So yeah, so the went gold label there into a blend.
Yeah, the gold label would be after 1968.
This is the pack you wanted to win, wasn't that?
So anyway, so that's the next sample. Then there's the gold label when it goes into a bit of a blend, and then there's the Powers Irish, which is an export bottle.
It looks like 2 1960s, 1 1970s, 1 1980s, and then today's one.
And then we've got the Powers John's Lane Cask Strength, just so you can do a comparison and a comparison. Okay.
So do you want to pick a number from there?
That's amazing.
And the number is 173.
Eric Wayne.
Dermot McDermott. And we have then it's the Trad Pot.
So last one, Trad Pot. So when so I volunteered to help at the events at one point in time. And then the event manager had to leave, and then they said, "Brian, would you mind running the events?" And I went, "Oh, okay." and then I foolishly put my name forward for saying, "Oh, do that." But I have to thank Leo Phelan for an awful lot of help, and he suggested doing sort of a special tasting series. So we did a trad pot tasting actually upstairs here, which was really a lot of fun. And this is similar kind of lineup to that, one or two substitutions. Anyway, first one, Jameson 15-year-old Millennium Edition, which is a stunning whiskey, and that little bottle's getting less and less, but enjoy it, whoever wins it. Then the Redbreast 15-year-old Maison whiskey, another phenomenal whiskey. Then Powers Aviation 75th anniversary, stunning. That's a second fill bourbon, isn't it? And trad pot and second fill bourbon. Oh, both, everything that I love about Powers.
And he's giving it away.
And then there's an Irish Whiskey Society Marrowbone Lane. So Peter, under Peter's tenure, and Fionan's assistance and Willie Murphy's assistance to get that bottle out. Another stunning one. And then to finish it off, Redbreast 27. So this is the current batch of Redbreast 27, because when I went to pour out the batch 1, there wasn't enough to fill the bottle, the sample bottle. So you're getting the latest batch instead. So as we had earlier tonight. Okay, let's pull that number and I can sit down and have a drink.
First of the evening.
There we go.
The number is 319.
Andrew Dickey.
Derek Carr. That wins the trad pot.
Congratulations and well done.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Brian. They're wonderful prizes. Now, moving on, we have from the sublime to the surreal, we have this bottle of Fireball. Who wants to pick the...
I'm getting cinnamon.
So go on, Eric. Pull the number there.
I'd probably get attacked by somebody if they get this one.
And if you win this one...
553.
553.
Kevin Crossan.
Kevin Crossan.
He's dead. And he's going to be...
But it also comes with a signed copy of Mike Billett's book, Pete and Whiskey, The Unbreakable Bond. Mike Billett, who very kindly did a tasting with us. You don't have to take the Fireball. And that's that's all of that. That's all of the prizes. I did want to just finish up by thanking the folks here at IDL, particularly to Eric Ryan, to Andrew Dickey, to Emma Waldron, to Ray Dempsey, to Owen Murphy, to Damien Cronin, to Keelan O'Mahony here in Bow Street. So please give them a round of applause. Also, not only did they give us the venue, they gave us the liquid. They travelled here. They put in so much work. As Andrew said, we've been batting this over and back quite literally for months, and it's great that that it finally came together. I'm really grateful. I'm delighted that we got to be here. So it's not just the venue. It was the liquid. It was all of the hard work of all of the wider team from IDL. So I'm really grateful for them. And thank you. We also have those that sponsored the prizes. We've got Glendalough Distillery. We've got Dick Max. We've got Slane Distillery, Mike Billett, and Brian Green. So thank you very much to all of them. This wouldn't have happened without the wider team in the Irish Whiskey Society. The events team came in here at like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and they had this place set up. It was like talk about a machine, a well-oiled machine. Talk about it, they were just so together. They and it's not just today. They put in a huge amount of work. Again, not just to this tasting, but throughout the year and the last couple of years. So please give them a huge round of applause. Particularly to Matt Jones, whose birthday it is today, and he's here.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Matthew. Happy birthday to you.
Definitely gone off script there, and also to the wider core committee in the Irish Whiskey Society, and to all of you guys who have been here throughout all of the tastings, who have bought tickets to come tonight. That's going to a very, very good cause. Also to you folks at home for again buying the tickets, buying the Raffle tickets and contributing. And without you, there wouldn't be a society. So I'm really grateful. And Sinead Gadirach, Iwagi, thanks very much indeed.
That's all. That's it.
The bar is open.